10 games. Ryan Hartman got 10 games for splitting open Tim Stützle's face when he drove him into the ice. The longest suspension in the league in 7 years. Pierre, why did the league come down so hard on Hartman?
Yeah, well, listen, the easiest part to answer that is the fact that he's a repeat offender. I mean, this is his fifth suspension. He's had fines. That part is very understandable, and you could see that part coming. But there's an underlying current to this decision, too. And I go back to one of George Parros's first interviews when he took over player safety back in September 2017. 7.5 years the big guy's been in charge of player safety, Gino. Time flies. But I remember sitting with him. He was doing the media rounds at the NHL Player Tour. And one of the things Parros said, and it always stuck with me, was that one of the areas that he wanted to come down hard on was the so-called non-hockey infractions, things that don't have to do with the game. You know, plays that are so outside the game that were dangerous. And we've seen that. You can disagree all you want with some of George Parros' decisions in player safety over the last 7.5 years. You know, I don't know that it's always been consistent. But in this particular area, the non-hockey play, Parros has always wanted to come down hard. And did he ever here with Ryan Hartman? Because that was a non-hockey play. That was ridiculous. It was dangerous. Ryan Hartman is lucky that Tim Stützle is not seriously injured, right? I mean, that was a really scary play. But it also comes after Ryan Hartman has had other non-hockey infractions on top of it all. Not just a repeat offender, Gino, but a repeat offender in that context that really bugs George Parros. So keep that in mind with all this.
Message sent. Look, just over a month to go to the NHL trade deadline now. When Craig Conroy made his deal with the Flyers last week, he said he wanted to give his players something because they deserve it for the way they've been playing. So now they're hanging on to the second wildcard spot. What's Conroy's plan now, Pierre?
Yeah, so let's start with I think the general game plan, which is this, that despite being legitimately in a playoff race, Calgary absolutely has a chance to make the playoffs. They're not going to let the short-term goals affect the longer-term vision, which is this, that Calgary won't go out and spend big assets on rental players, on a pending UFA. That doesn't make sense for the Calgary Flames. If they do something else that's at least, you know, impactful, it's once again going to be a hockey trade like we saw last week. So with that in mind, there's a name that my understanding is the Calgary Flames remain interested in despite the acquisition last week of Frost and Farabee, and that is Dylan Cozens in Buffalo. Now, the Flames have been enamored with him all year long. I don't know if they have the pieces to make a deal work with the Buffalo Sabres for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think Kevin Adams in Buffalo is actually shopping Dylan Cozens. He's taking calls because Buffalo's in last place and he has to take calls. But if he moves Dylan Cozens, who signed to a long-term deal, I think it's going to have to be apples for apples and not just a futures deal where there's players coming Buffalo's way that really helps his team too. And listen, 2/3 of the league have checked in with Buffalo and Dylan Cozens, Gino. I mean, he's obviously a name that's garnered a lot of attention, but he's a name that fits into what Calgary is planning long-term. A right shot, young center who's 23 years old. So whether or not they can actually get this conversation to go another level remains to be seen, but he would be a name that remains on Calgary's radar.
Hey, Pierre, for the first time in a long time, I'm not asking you what the Canucks are going to do with JT Miller because that's finally done. So let me ask you this. What's Vancouver's plan to fill the void left behind by JT Miller's departure?
There you go. That's the next question, right, Gino? Well, they need to replace him. And listen, that's easier, you know, that's easier said than done. But and it's not necessarily something that the Canucks can absolutely guarantee they can do before March 7th. Let's be real. I mean, going out and trying to find a top six center is the priority for the organization, Gino, I would say, between now and puck drop next fall, right? I mean, it's hard to go find those guys, but that is a big priority for the organization. They're going to continue to make calls around the league to see what's out there. By the way, we just spoke about Dylan Cozens. The Canucks have talked to Buffalo about Dylan Cozens. Now, a lot of that we believe was part of the Elias Pettersson talks, and now we think Vancouver has taken Pettersson off the market for now. Want to see if he responds to Miller being traded. But nevertheless, I mean, that would be the type of player that would help Vancouver as well. So we'll see where this goes, but the Canucks have cap flexibility now. They would like to go acquire a center, and we'll see if and when they can get that done.
Just some of the stories Pierre's working on right now. Pierre, CJ, and Darren will be back with the full version of Insider Trading on the early edition of SportsCenter.